Andrew Horn, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm stoked to have you here.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Andrew, you've done such incredible work, and I'm so excited to dive into this today because in the concept of the masculine and feminine, and what I love that you do is you're all about communication, community, and connection. And I wanted to dive into the topic around being able to communicate better to, enhance relationships, enhance our life, but also being able to express what it is that we want, which I think is a huge thing when it comes to communication, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and this is so much of what I've built my life around, was spent, much of my life in a place where I was incapable of trusting myself, expressing myself, articulating ideas, trouble to find the confidence to connect with the type of people that I really wanted to befriend, work with, date, you name it. And so then that's what threw me into this lifelong journey of really kind of studying the art of meaningful conversation, of interpersonal dynamics, of neurolinguistic programming, like how can we communicate clearly? And then ultimately what I worked my way back to was, what I talk about a lot these days is the idea of social flow, is really how to kind of detach yourself from the need for external validation, people pleasing, and to detach from the fear of external judgment and really connect with who you are, what you care about, what you want to know about other people, and how you want to feel, so that we can start to connect with other people by harnessing our intrinsic motivation to express ourselves. But, through all those angles, whether that is meeting someone you just met at a networking event, whether that is getting up on a TED stage, whether that's having a contentious conversation with your boss or your wife, your partner, I've really been able to synthesize pretty tangible constructs in all those arenas. So just fire away and let me know where you want to start.
Yeah. Well, let's start at the start of not being able to express. How do we get from a place where we actually struggle to express what it is to somebody else, be it a loved one or a boss or whatever? It's in some sort of relationship, there's this feeling within that you this is what I need to say, but I don't know how to say it because, what was your experience when you first was there? Was there fear? Was there judgment? What was coming up for you?
All right. You guys ready?
We're ready.
Let's do this. Okay. So I want to make this tangible for everyone who's listening to this, who might be watching it. And so what I want everyone to think about right now is, let's just say, a contentious relationship. So someone that you have a little beef with, maybe a family member where it doesn't feel complete, a relationship where you don't feel fully expressed. So just go ahead and take a moment and ground into that. And so now we're talking about why we don't ask for what we want, why we don't fully express ourselves. And so the main reason that we do not express ourselves is because we have a story, a belief about what will happen if we were to express ourselves. So this is the idea that, if we're using work, or most of your listeners listening more for personal development or professional development, because I can use a work example, I could use a relationship example. What's most relevant for the audience?
Personal, I would say.
Cool. So let's do this in the context of a relationship, right? So let's say that you were cheated on your partner while you were early in the relationship. And so the idea of not acknowledging your truth, that there was some indiscretion when you guys first started dating. And so what I say is that we have a story or belief of what would happen if I were to tell my partner that. Well, so here's the thing. It's here's what I did in the beginning of the relationship. The story or the belief could be, this person is going to leave me. This person is going to hate me, all these other things. And so there's immediately a story belief. It doesn't have to be that intense. It can be, if I were to express to my partner that I want to sleep in separate beds, which is actually something that a surprising amount of people want to do, but don't actually express because they're afraid of it. That what is the story or belief that my partner would do? How would they respond? Would they think that I don't love them anymore? Would they think that I'm not sexually attracted to them? What are all these things? And so the reason we don't express ourselves is because we have a story about what the future holds for us. And so what we can do to really take the charge out of that story and come back to what we want to share is something I call a reality check. And it's just basically inspired by a woman named Byron Katie. So she wrote a book called Loving What Is and created this incredible framework called The Work. And so anytime you feel anxious or anytime there's something that you're not expressing, you're going to ask yourself these 5 questions, okay? And the first question is this true? Right? So let's use this example of, so I can't tell my partner I want to sleep in separate beds. So because they're going to get upset with me, they're going to think that I'm not interested in them, and it's going to lead to kind of a fight. So I would ask myself, is this true? I'd be like, maybe. And then I would ask myself the second question, can I 100% absolutely for certain know this is true? And the answer is almost always no, I cannot. So we acknowledge that this is a story and not divine truth. The next is, how do I act when I accept this as truth? Or how do I not act when I accept this as truth? So by accepting the story that we've told ourselves, oftentimes we already feel bad, and it makes us feel anxious, it makes us feel insecure, and it oftentimes leads to inaction or insecure action. So we acknowledge that the future we're living into, the stories we tell ourselves, are having an impact on how we feel right now. So we acknowledge that. And then the last question would be, who would I be without this thought? What would I do if I didn't have this thought? Well, I'd probably ask for what I want. I'd feel a little more confident that what I want is valid and deserves to be heard. And then we ask ourselves this final question, which is called the turnaround. And the turnaround basically says, could the exact opposite be true? Could the exact opposite, could I say this and could my husband think, oh, wow, I'm so happy that you asked for that. Here's something that I've kind of wanted that I haven't been able to ask for in the relationship. Or they could say, wow, I would really love to sleep in separate beds too. And so you acknowledge that there's different possibilities there. And so next time you feel anxious, you're not expressing yourself, if you can take the time to just turn that little piece of pressure, that little piece of insecurity into these questions, you will take the charge out of what it is you want to say. And then you get to move into your intrinsic motivation, what you want to say. And what I always say to people is that when you want to ask for something, be that in a relationship, be that at work, oftentimes we are hesitant to ask for what we want because it feels like we're just coming in with a request. And so what I say is the way that you earn the right to ask for something of someone else, to share your truth, is by creating a space for them to do it first, right?
Ooh,
So
I like
if I want to ask for something in my relationship, right? Like if I want to ask for one night a week that I want, like basically I get to come and create a space, or I get to come and say, it's like, check in with how they're feeling. You know, it's based like, it's like, I wanted to talk about like how we're doing in the relationship and like make sure that we can really create a space where both of us can ask for what we want. And so I wanted to ask, like, is there anything that you're not getting from the relationship that you would like right now? Is there anything that we're not doing? If it's at work, it's, if we're going in and asking someone, hey, I really need you to have these things on my desk at 3:30 every single week. So if I lead with that, then it's another request that's coming there. But if I come in and I was like, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything I can be doing to help you with your work? Anything that I can be doing? So by creating a space where other people can be heard, where other people can ask for what they want, then when you come in, you're creating a space where what you would like to do, what you would like to express is more valid, more likely to be heard. So that simple process there of creating a space where other people can do what we'd like to do for ourselves oftentimes makes it so much easier. Does that make sense?
That makes so much sense. That's actually such great advice. Where my head went when you were talking about the first thing of, actually coming to your partner and communicating and asking for what you want. A hurdle that I think a lot of people can struggle with, because I've been in this situation so many times, is that I know that there's something up, but I don't even know within myself what it is that I actually want. So I don't know how to express. So I just react, right? So I'm in this state of reaction, and I'm not sure if it came from a place of like not feeling comfortable to express to a certain person, or if I just literally was so disconnected from myself that I didn't know how to ask or what I wanted. So what is that? Have you experienced that process before?
Well, so much of the work that I do with men specifically is teaching them the fundamentals of Gestalt communication, which is an offshoot of Gestalt therapy started by Fritz Perls in the 1950s. And Gestalt communication is all about speaking truth to the human experience. And so it's authenticity and curiosity. So it is, what are you thinking and feeling? That's valid. Curiosity. But ultimately what we do with a lot of our guys is that we use these tools to connect with their emotions and express themselves more masterfully. And so the way that we do this is that what you just talked about is so often the idea of our emotions. If you ask most guys, most people, like the emotion that is most present for them right now, it's really challenging to actually go in and put words to that. to explore. It's like, well, what is he, how can you describe it? And so what happens is that, like, if you think about the human experience, about consciousness, about like how we are acting in the world, just imagine an iceberg. So if you see this iceberg right where my hat is, like, this is basically the conscious mind. So this is what we're dealing with. And then my head, this is the subconscious. So this is like right below the water. And then if you've ever seen those images of icebergs, you only see the little tip. And then everything under the water, 85% of who we are is just unconscious stuff, like all these things that are in there. And it's just stored in our emotions and all these things that are deep down there. And so oftentimes what happens is we are basically reacting to this emotional self that we have not fully taken the time to integrate into our lives, to understand, to engage, and to process, which leads to us being incapable of articulating how we feel and what we want. And so some of the simple things that we teach our guys to do is to actually practice emotional mastery. And so for anyone who actually wants to try this, I'll give you a little exercise that you could simply do. And so this would be the kind of thing where, there's if you're doing this with a friend, you're doing this by yourself, there's an initiator and a reflector. An initiator is a person who would basically go in to connect with their emotional state. And a reflector is a person who's there to take them deeper. And there can be many reflectors, but always just one initiator, one person who's going in. Do you want to do it right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and it doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive too.
Yes.
So first question I would ask you is, so close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
All right. So what is the emotion that is most present in your body right now?
Anxiety.
Okay.
Is that an emotion?
And where do you feel that?
Okay.
Keep your eyes closed.
I feel it in my heart.
Okay. And what does it feel like?
It feels like a beating really fast.
And if it had a voice, what would it be saying to you?
Ask for help.
What does that sound like?
I don't get a sound, but I'm getting a feeling.
And what is it?
The feeling is like, the feeling is actually being held. Like being held, and the sound, I guess, is someone saying, you're going to be okay.
So what does that beating heart need?
It needs to trust. And it needs to open up to help, to receive.
Beautiful. And what do you feel right now?
I feel deeper breathing to my stomach.
Beautiful. And so this line of questioning where we would come here is, again, it's, and we can go through an entire process here of basically, rather than talking about a story of the past of who you've been, rather than talking about future of what you're worried about or anything, what we do is we focus on the present moment. What's happening right now? What are you feeling? Giving those things a voice, connecting with it, and speaking from this place. And there's this analogy that a guy I know who does men's work, his name is Owen Marcus, and he always talks about it as like, imagine that you are a stone in a river, okay? And so if you are a stone in a river and emotions are sticks that are flowing down the river. So just imagine that, like, let's say anxiety, one of these things that basically is an emotion, it's a stick, it's coming down the river. And then what happens is basically like it hits you and then you get anxious, right? And so, but you're like bustling around and you're working, but you actually take some time to actually say like, oh, wow, I'm going to process this. I'm going to engage it. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to share it like you just did with me. I process it. And so the emotion just kind of rolls off the side of the stick and keeps going down the river, right? But so let's say like another one comes and it's a contentious relationship you have with a work partner or, a life partner. And you're so busy that it just hits you and then you stuff it down and just keep going through your life because you're really busy. So now what happens is rather than that emotion, that stick bouncing off the rock and going down the river, it just sits there. And so then the next time that a stick comes, when it tries to hit you to actually engage and reprocess, it gets caught up on the other stick. So now you're trying to deal with that other anxiety that was there, this other anxiety was there. And over time, we become these emotional dams where all these emotions that we don't actually process, that we don't actually engage, just become intertwined. Mm-hmm. So when we're trying to have a conversation about one thing, we're actually responding to all these intertwined emotions that we've never really dealt with. And so it becomes so much more difficult to actually express ourselves. And so that's why this emotional mastery piece is so important for actually giving us insight into what it is that we're feeling. Because when we understand what it is that we're feeling, what is present, we get to talk about that. What do I need? Then our decisions, our requests of the people around us are so much more informed by the totality of who we are, what we really need in our lives. And so, it's why I personally have been drawn to facilitating primarily groups of men, but these circles, whether they're women's circles, whether that's with a therapist, I think it's one of the most powerful aspects of doing this deep kind of interpersonal work is that it allows us to ask for what we want. And so that's kind of one piece of this.
Yeah, I love that. And I would be interested to understand from a man's perspective, because I work with men and I'm deeply passionate about men's work because I see it sometimes as being like this big resistance that comes up around men expressing emotion. So what is your experience when men come into your retreats and come into your work? Is there resistance to them actually wanting to feel? And how can they be more okay with feeling emotion?
Yeah, it's such a loaded question, and I could speak about so many of them. I think that, oftentimes we have resistance to most of the activities that are going to be truly rewarding and growth oriented. So there is certainly resistance, whether that is through men who had been judged previously in their lives for being too emotional, where emotions had been boxed in as being feminine, as being gay, as like all these other things of a weaker attribute of a man, which is something that I experienced growing up. I feel that in many ways we're transitioning and really transcending a lot of those tropes today. But I think that especially for my generation, millennials and the one after, that we can certainly associate that with the inability, the cultural expectations of a man to be certain and not to be able to show weakness, which is some of the emotions that we might qualify as sadness, shame, anger. On the other side of the spectrum, I think one of the emotions that we very rarely talk about, unless it's in kind of situations where there's been an eruption of it, is anger. Mm-hmm. And if you think about anger, the way that we have seen anger expressed in society is through violence. You know what I mean? In sexual violence, things like the Me Too movement, things that are coming out there. And again, Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt, he says that when we do not express emotion, we suppress emotion. And so if we just acknowledge that emotions are a part of the human experience and they come up, and that if we just say that anger is a toxic emotion and we don't actually express it, then we suppress it. And then what happens is, rather than just leaking out into our lives, we can have these explosions of violence where people do these really detrimental things to not only their own lives, like taking a job, becoming addicted, but also to other people, by actually harming them. And so if you think about whoever taught us how to express anger, like in a men's group the other day, it's like I literally had a pillow and I was angry. I'm dealing with some deep family stuff right now. And I just basically was resistant to even expressing it, but I ended up screaming into a pillow. And what I felt after screaming into a pillow was a lightness. I literally felt the anger out of me. I wasn't there. And so when I went to go and have a conversation with my family, literally later that night, I was coming to a place of being a clearing of that anger was not inside of me to force me to react in any way that I didn't really want to, And I think that, we are so much more than our emotions. And our emotions are a part of this equation. But when we really engage them, when we really hold weight for them and allow ourselves to feel them, we're more capable of acting in alignment with who we really think we are. And who we think we are is the values that we ascribe to. It is the dreams that we have for our lives and the people that we care about. And the more time that we spend engaging the emotions, we can do that. And so I think that in terms of the resistance that is there, I think that there's fear that expressing things like anger will hurt us, that expressing things like shame will make us less than. And one of the things that I've started to do with guys in the beginning of men's groups and in the middle of the beginning of our Junto retreats is it's the most powerful thing is I have every guy go around the circle and they look at the other one and they say, I'm not here to compete. I'm not here to compete. And it's just this powerful thing where until we've acknowledged it, and I get goosebumps coming up the back of my spine as I talk about it, because until we say those words, no one's even conscious of the reality that they are competing. Is that they want to be more powerful, more secure, more confident, perceived as more successful than the next guy. And when you say that, they realize this subconscious drive to compete. And don't get me wrong, like at the end of the day, we actually have a container where we do compete, because I don't think that it's bad to compete. I think that it's really powerful, and in the right context, it can drive innovation. It can drive personal growth. And so we provide space for that adrenaline infused activity to take place in a healthy context. But when we're really going into this emotional state, we're allowing ourselves to be seen, to really understand that like we are here to really just dive in, understand ourselves, and hold space for other people to explore who they are without judgment, without competition.
I love that. And, you know, it's actually not that unfamiliar as a woman to feel shame in experiencing anger. And I've probably had a big experience of this not too long ago, where I noticed that I was suppressing the emotion of anger. And for me, it just took like boxing classes and ecstatic dance and just like moving my body and being okay with expressing it in that way. And it changed so much. It changed a lot of relationships. It changed like how I was communicating. It changed how I was feeling and what I was storing in my body just by being able to feel okay to express it. And I think the same thing with anger and women is that we are made to feel like it's not an okay or a pretty or a beautiful emotion to experience. And so many people will just shut that down as well. So it's cool to see that men also have that experience, which is the same as women. How do you feel about being able to come together as men and women to express that?
Yeah, so this is something that I think is really important kind of subject. Is I remember that probably about 2 years ago when I was really starting to focus on men, I had this dinner with women who were a part of this thing called the Transformational Leadership Council. And so these are women who had sold, you know, between them New York Times bestsellers like in like the 20s, who had, you know, really kind of like led hundreds of thousands of people and were really kind of in the human potential movement of the 60s through kind of like the 80s. And they talked about their husbands and their partners who were getting involved in the men's movement of like the 1980s. This is when men's groups started to really become popularized. Mankind Project was created. You had people like John Lennon joining men's groups, and you know, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Iron John, two of the seminal books of that era also coming out. And what they talked about is that they had this experience that when men would meet in these male-only containers, that for many of them, the experience around it was that there was not a real structure to them that allowed them to be included in any way. And so what they felt was their husbands going and almost getting their intimacy fix so that when they came home to them, they didn't have any interest doing that emotional work or being there because they had done that with their guys. And so it really felt like this othering experience. And so, you know, what I always talk about with our personal brand of men's work is, like I say, men's work is service, is that we don't just do this to be better for ourselves, to be happier, to be more confident, to be more effective in our lives. We do this so that we're more capable of supporting the people and communities we care about. And so even though we do meet in a male-only container, and I'll talk about why I feel that that is valuable, is that we really do encourage all guys to share their experience before and after they're engaging in these types of things. And so when men go on my retreat, before they get there, you know, if they have romantic partners that they're engaged with, we have them sending them a note of gratitude for holding the space for them to be there that weekend. When they come home, I basically invite them to share all the most important things that became clear to them with their partner. So it's like, that's my routine with my wife, is every time I come from men's group, I say, like, here's what was most important. Here's what came up. So she feels included in that process, you know, and she doesn't have to do necessarily the deep, heavy work, but she gets the kind of like Cliff Notes kind of vision of what actually went down. And in terms of the difference between male only and female only kind of containers, I don't think it's, you know, a but. I think it's an and. So it's not only these male-only containers, but I think that there is value in allowing both spaces to exist. And the way that I've experienced that is kind of the difference between masculine emotionality and feminine emotionality, where there is some kind of like biological factors at play in the way that men relate to one another versus the way that women relate to one another. If you look at the prevalence of something like estrogen, which triggers a more nurturing, compassion, connected response, versus something like adrenaline, testosterone, these things that are inherently like a little more aggressive, more physical. And how that shows up in emotionality is that if you go to women's circle and someone is sharing one of these deep, vulnerable shares, the instinct that is there is to support, is to acknowledge, to see, to comfort, physical touch, the holding, and beautiful. And that's also, and I by no means mean this is the only experience. I'm just generalizing to paint an image, and we can talk about some of that stuff as well. And then with guys, one of the powerful things is that, if you look at how men develop bonds, they actually talk about like the value of roughhousing to release some of these chemicals that actually do allow for deeper connection. And so in the realm of men's work and how we think about men's circles, what's really powerful is that you provide space for men to enter into an agreement of support. But the way that looks is oftentimes very different, because what I will do if a man tells me that he feels ashamed of something that he did is that my goal, the way that I can best support him, is not by hugging him, by telling him that he's okay, that it's okay, but it's actually by being there and taking him deeper into it, and by challenging him to feel it more. Like I want to tell a guy, you know how shitty you feel? Connect with that. Magnify it in size. What if you could triple it in size? And rather than nurturing, it's that what I do is I hold space for him to do that. I challenge him. When people are in shares, like I was just sharing something so vulnerable, and my friend just looked at me and he was like, bullshit, in the middle of something that is so sad. And I was like, fuck you, because that's what I was actually thinking in the moment. But then we actually talked about it, and he was feeling like I was being inauthentic or in my head about something and not my emotions, and ultimately led to something there. So just the difference there, I think, in how, the masculine and the feminine, I'll say masculine and the feminine versus male and female, because I really do believe that it is a spectrum, is that it holds space for a little bit more of the challenge and aggressiveness in the expression of emotion that is slightly different than that in the female container. And so that's one of the big differences that I've witnessed.
That's actually amazing to know as well. And would you say that when they're expressing, they're in their masculine essence, expressing as that?
I would say so. Yeah. It's like when we kind of go in there, it is my masculine essence.
The reason why I'm saying this is because I've worked with men, and I've noticed that because I can actually hold a very strong masculine essence, like holding space, it polarizes them into their feminine essence, which allows them to express and feel vulnerable enough to like share emotion and how they're feeling and release it and go through that work. And so I've been told by someone in particular, like, you hold, like, I feel most comfortable sharing this side of me, this feminine side of me, to you to express, because it really heals a lot of stuff. And then I can go back to my partner and I can show up better, and I don't have to show that quote unquote weak side to my partner. And so it's kind of like holding this space for a masculine man that's dominant in his masculine to actually feel safe in his feminine to express emotion. And then he doesn't have to go and then express it. He's like in a safe container.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I oftentimes do with our guys when they come on our Junto retreats is we have this exercise where I have them basically get a piece of paper, they put a line down the middle, and on the left, I have them write masculine. And on the right, I have them write feminine. And then what I do is I give them 60 seconds, and then I say, what are all the characteristics and traits of the masculine? And I have them write all these things down. And then I look at the feminine, and I have them write all the characteristics that they associate with the feminine. And what's just interesting is that, like, again, we all have these kind of internal biases. And like when we do this kind of subconsciously again, and we just allow ourselves to express and externalize some of these internal beliefs we have about the masculine and the feminine, it can be very different for people, but understanding what they associate with the masculine and feminine kind of gives them a clearer understanding of values that they have on both sides of the spectrum, which I think liberates them to really be more fluid. And I think, again, and so much of the reason that I think we do men's work is to understand some of the limitations that we've assigned to our identity, like who we need to be. And it's really about liberating ourselves from the rigidity of subscribing to a limiting gender identity and saying, it's like, again, like, you are so much more than masculine or feminine. It's like, you want to be able to flow between all these things when the space is necessary. So yeah, I think that, I think that some of the more, that's the thing, is that I think that a lot of times people would associate emotionality with the feminine. But as I've gotten deeper into the work, I think that I have been able to really process emotion. And when I'm doing that, it occurs for me as such a courageous, strong activity, like to go in and like to be angry and to sit with it and to feel like shit and to be there. Like, I almost equate it. It's like, it's literally like the gym for your emotions, and I approach it that way. And so I think that I do approach it, very much in that way when I'm there. And I feel like I actually can be in my masculine when I'm expressing those emotions.
Yeah. What is, like, how can women, especially in like an intimate relationship with a man, or just a woman to man relationship, friendship, how can we as women support men in feeling safe and strong to release emotion, or to, like, what help can a woman be in that scenario?
Yeah. I think that one of the really helpful things is understanding what is the container that you're entering into because again, in our spaces, one of the things that we're not doing ever is solution finding. When we go into men's group, when we go into facilitation and a retreat, the container is always, look, we are not here to find solutions about what we need in our lives. What we're here to do is to find out what's real for us right now. And so it's the idea that, and this is true, I would say, oftentimes more so for men, where they're looking for solutions to kind of emotions as opposed to, but so I think that both parties being able to prescribe to this, like, look, we're just holding space to truly hear, to understand. I would say understand is a better word than hear. I oftentimes say, like, don't ask questions, understand people. And if you try to understand people, where they're coming from and what they're feeling, you're much more likely to do that than if you're just asking questions. So it is really understanding that you're not entering into a territory for solution finding or anything. And that, if you have insight or advice that you'd like to offer, that you ask for that before when a guy does go to this arena, because I think that it can be so vulnerable, and for so many men who have not had the experience of going to these arenas. So if they are met with judgment of those emotions, or if they are met with a solution or advice that makes them feel like you have an answer to something that they haven't been able to figure out, it can oftentimes, trigger something that makes it less likely for them to go back to that space. And here's one thing that I want to offer up, just because it brought it up for me, is, one of the modalities that I'm a student of is this Gestalt communication framework. And one of the simplest things that I think anyone, whether this is in a relationship, but especially at work, is the idea of, when we want to create these spaces where people can share all of themselves, where they can be vulnerable, one of the quickest ways to completely terrorize a safe space like that is for people to offer advice. And so I'm going to tell you what I mean by this and how we can offer insight without belittling others. Is because if you come into a business circle and you talk about how you're struggling to make payroll right now and not sure how you're going to make rent, like you just have all these things going up and you've been feeling depressed, and then someone comes in and they say, Sam, here's what you got to do. You guys are getting this much sleep. You got to go to the gym 3 days a week. Then now what's happened is, what used to be an even playing field is now this person's up here because they know exactly how to get through these things that you haven't been able to get up. So now it's no longer a safe space. But what they can do is they can say, Sam, I get it. A year ago, I was in the same space where I was struggling to make payroll, and here's what I did that really helped me. And so if you just think about this, don't share advice, share your experience. Because if you are giving someone advice, that is not based on your experience, go fuck yourself. I don't want to hear your theories. I want people who've actually applied ideas and insight and things to their own life that have worked. And so it's the idea that we can always do that, because it just challenges us to say like, oh, I experienced something similar and here's what worked for me. Because when you share from your experience, you're oftentimes acknowledging challenging situations that you've also endured, and you're not theorizing or anything. You say, here's what worked for me. It's not about necessarily telling them to do anything. It's just an offering of your own experience.
Yeah, I love that, because A, it's taking you into a vulnerable place as well. So you're like, you're resonating on that level. But then B, we're also bombarded with people telling us what we should and shouldn't do like all day long.
Totally.
And when we're in that space, it's like the last thing that we kind of want, right? So yeah, I definitely love that. How can communication and this clear communication and expression be able to enhance our intimate relationships?
Woo! That's a good one. I would say, how can communication enhance our intimate? So what I would say is, to enhance our intimate relationships, what is most important to understand is really pointing our curiosity inwards. And what is so challenging, I think, is for people to really get a firm understanding of their own desire and what they would really like. And so what happens is, I think that there becomes so much dysfunction in the bedroom because people do not know how to articulate what it is they really want, because they don't even know how to figure that out. And then when they don't get what they don't know they want, they resent their partner for not giving it to them, because they don't have the sex life that they want. And oftentimes we just basically kind of push off responsibility to our partner that we're engaging with. And so how communication can really enhance intimacy, I think that so much of it, I'm bringing this to the realm of really like sex right now. We can talk about just closeness and depth in our relationships. But I would say that really understanding, and there's a wonderful project called desire mapping. That's a whole framework here of basically how to articulate your desires. And so I think that challenging ourselves in our relationships to point our curiosity inwards and to ask ourselves the question, what am I not receiving that I would like? What am I afraid to ask for? And what do I really want? And what we can do here again in terms of opening up to intimacy is when we take the time to ask ourselves those questions, but offering those to our partner. So at the same time, it's like, hey, but do this work, come to a place where you understand it, and then offer that up as a place for your partner to also tap into the things that you would really like there. And so those three questions, which is, what am I not doing that I would like to be? What am I scared to ask for? And what do I really want? Is just three powerful ways to start there. And then in terms of intimacy in general, I think that the essence of, so intimacy, I just articulated as a mutual feeling of closeness. And so to really have a deep, meaningful connection, intimacy, I think that there are really four variables that are present. So I think of it as vast. Okay, so intimacy is vast. So you have vulnerability. You have both parties feel like they can share exactly who they are. You have appreciation. Both parties feel seen, heard, and appreciated. And then you have support. And this is a really interesting one, is that both parties feel like they are supported in the relationship. And then you have also a drive to support the other person. Is that if you surround yourself with friends and people who you are called to support, I always talk about this, is I think one of the cardinal rules of finding and choosing friends is, if you surround yourself with people that you just want to help on their professional, personal projects, then you will feel so much better, because you're constantly helping, and helping another human is the most fulfilling thing we can do. And the other person is going to appreciate that they are so supported and want to reciprocate that. So both parties feel supported. And then trust. And trust is that people are going to do what they say and mean what they say. And so again, it's vast. So it's vulnerability, appreciation, support, and trust. And so a simple way to evaluate and introduce more intimacy into our relationships, whether those are romantic, whether those are personal, is to look at those four qualities in any of our relationships. And anytime we have a contentious relationship or something feels like it's a little off, we can now have a really solid framework to evaluate what's actually missing. And then we can open that up again of like, what does someone else need in this arena, and really make a request of what we'd like to feel that more presently.
Oh, that's so good. And a question on that is, if you were entering into a relationship and you wanted to kind of set that container, how do you openly express, is that something that you would say at the start? Like, would you set that container, or would you allow it to unfold and then express it? Because it comes to values, really.
I would agree. I think that, some of the most fundamental work that really not a lot of people do is this around values work. And I think that values work for individuals is, again, it's how we can establish an identity that is really built and constructed on our own terms, as opposed to race, gender, identity, age, you name it. And so while values are so important for understanding who we are and how we'd like to express ourselves in the world, I think that relationship values are such a powerful way to open up this type of understanding in a relationship. When I found my wife, Mickey, we've been together for 8 years now. I had these values that I had looked at in a relationship, because I just did this because I had been a bachelor for so long and had never really found the person that I want to spend my life with. But I was also starting to really kind of immerse myself in this entrepreneurial, activated community of entrepreneurs. And I saw that the happiest people were the ones that were in really committed romantic relationships. They were like these expansive, awesome things. And I was like, okay, I want to open myself up there. And so to make it easier for myself to evaluate basically what I wanted in a partner, I created this acronym, and it was LACE. And so it was looks. I needed to be undeniably physically attracted to my partner. Adventure. I needed someone that I could experience new things with and that would bring new experiences in my life. I wanted someone who challenged me. So someone who was not afraid to challenge, me emotionally, spiritually, physically. And the last one was enhancement, is that I wanted to be with someone that I could bring with my high school buddies, my college frat bros, or my like activated, UN Summit Series kind of entrepreneurial crowd. And so what happened is that, again, I just had those values that were there. And so it helped me to ground into what was really most important to me. And there's so many that I built from there. But, and I shared that with her early on. And there's another thing that's helpful when you establish relationship values, or values that you're seeking in a romantic partner, is you're able to understand when your actions are out of alignment with those values, right? And it's so powerful when, as a team, you can set these things where it's one thing for me to say, like, I have LACE, right? And that was what I brought into it. But I think that when you as a couple take the time in a good place, this is not something that you do when either party is upset or angry or unexpressed, but when you're in a good place. So when you guys are feeling good, when you sit down and you say, what are the 5 values? We'll start, whenever you do values work, you don't start by saying, what are the 5? You say, what are all the values of our relationship? You just dump them out. Now let's just do an exercise. So this is something that you can actually do with your romantic partner. Let's make it real. And so if you were to start here, like, what are our relationship values? You would start, and if you Google, like, what are relationship values, you're going to list of 250 that you can actually look at. And then just write down all the values that are most important to you. And then just basically what you want to do is that you want to just create a list, and you want to say, okay, like, let's go through this, and then let's list our top 10. And then we're going to look at our top 10 after we summarize it down, and we're going to take it to there. Like, okay, can we get it to 5? And so you basically slim in every single time. Because if you have more than, say, 5, that's kind of like the golden rule for values. That if you have more than that, it becomes more challenging to actually kind of think of them in the present moment, to kind of compare them against your actions. But when you have relationship values that both parties have agreed to, when someone is doing something that may be out of alignment with those values, you get to say, do you think that this is in alignment with this value? And what will happen is that the other person will have a reference where they get to evaluate their own actions against the value that they have articulated for themselves. So it becomes easier for a partner to point out an undesired action in the relationship that they actually want to work through. And so I think that relationship values is such a powerful place to invite that in and to make it easier to evaluate our actions.
I love that so much. And I love the actionable steps that you've given, like, this whole way through. So great. Someone could absolutely transform their whole communication by watching this episode. I love it. And I have like I could continue on with so many different topics, but I recognize that we don't have all day. The last question I have for you on this is, what is your, like, how has understanding the masculine and feminine, be it within yourself or how you relate to your partner, how has that enhanced your life?
Yeah, I think it's most enhanced my life by allowing me to understand the dynamic that was prevalent and important to me in my romantic partnership. And so I'm married to this absolute like rock star of a woman. Her name's Mickey. She's an incredible entrepreneur, activist, speaker, writer. And early in our relationship, it was challenging. She's 7 years older than I am, and she's really the first woman that I've ever been with. And so understanding the dynamics of masculine, feminine, for polarity to exist, really helped me to understand what energy I needed to bring into the relationship to allow my partner, who for so much of her life occupies the masculine, to run these businesses and to just fucking kick ass and take names. And where I love that, it really did challenge me once I understood the construct of masculine and feminine to really identify, like, what are the behaviors that I associate with the masculine, and how can I step more deeply into that so that we were able to retain a spark in our relationship. And like, one of the things that was interesting, this came out of David Data, is he talked about early on the idea that for the masculine to like fully express itself in a romantic relationship with the divine feminine, your priority will not be your romantic relationship or your family, even as much as your partner may request it, but that your priority will occur for you is this idea of actualizing purpose, of doing the thing that you need to do in the world. And whether that is a business, whether that is your art, whether that is your own personal development or service, that it is only when you are fully giving yourself to that path that you will occupy the energy that will allow for your partner to exist in the divine feminine. And where my partner is also able to be more fluid and to go through this, when she's with me, when we're in the bedroom, when we're in our home, when we're on trips, when we're with our friends, like, she loves me, and this relationship works so beautifully because she can go to that space and because I can occupy that. And like, even as I talk about it, it feels so nice because it's an invitation and challenge for me to step deeper into, that king energy, that masculine energy that is rewarding and that I love, while also allowing her to occupy that space where she feels, most at home. And so that's the example that really does come up for me. And so I think that, again, anyone who's looking for an introduction to that type of polarity work, I would say that the OG of the space is a guy named John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And then kind of a more kind of rogue, rebellious take on it was David Data, Way of the Superior Man. Both were super helpful for me. And so I would say that would be a really powerful way that the masculine and feminine has really contributed to my life.
Yes, I love that. And I can relate fully with your wife, right? Like, as someone who is entrepreneurial and in business and has purpose and wants to achieve, there's nothing more that I crave in an intimate relationship than someone that can step fully into the masculine and allow me to surrender into the feminine. Like, it's like, you don't want to go all the time. You want to be able to soften in those times, even though you are on purpose a lot. So I definitely relate to that.
And I think that, when we talk about this kind of emotional work, is, again, it's like what I've really come to realize is that the more time that we hold space for guys to, whether that's through men's retreat, whether that's through weekly, biweekly men's groups, to hold space for their own emotional experience, is that they can be more present to the, oftentimes like overwhelming and like fully present emotion of the divine feminine, and to hold space for that and to not be so impacted to the point where you need to react to it, but that we can hold space for it, appreciate it, admire it, love it, and respond to it how we'd really like to. And so I think that, again, for any guys out there who may be listening to this, or for any fiery women who would like to empower their men to be able to hold stronger space, I think that this emotional work, this emotional mastery, is such a powerful part of that process.
Andrew, I couldn't agree more. Amazing. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and especially the men's work and holding this space for men to get into a beautiful divine masculinity that you show. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Where can people go to find out who you are and what you do and follow your work?
Absolutely. So, where are you guys in Australia?
I'm in all over.
Yeah.
The audience is all over Australia. There's US. There's like it's yeah. Speak
Well,
to
so I was going to say, if most of your audience was in Australia, because I think that my wife and I were there in, oh man, what was it, in June, and I think that we're coming back in November. She's going to be speaking at something called Business Chicks, and so I think I'm actually going to be doing my first Junto men's retreat in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also just one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. So right now I kind of have my life chunked up into thirds. So 1/3 of my life is focused on this platform for the exploration of modern masculinity and personal transformation. That's called the Junto, and the website is wejunto.com. So you'll see retreats set up all over the country, and then one shortly to be added in late November in Australia. The second third of my time is spent on this startup that we created 5 years ago called Tribute. So Tribute's been called Hallmark 2.0 by the New Yorker. We've been on the Today Show several times. And imagine waking up on your birthday and every person you love has filmed a 1-minute video telling you why you're awesome. So that is a Tribute video, and we built the first collaborative video editing software that automatically compiles those videos from all your friends and stitches them into one of these videos you can give to anyone on a birthday, wedding, graduate.
I heard the story on Men Talks, the podcast that you did, and I was like, this isn't like, I got goosebumps like with your story. So amazing.
Well, so yeah, if anyone wants to check that out, that's tribute.co. And then you mentioned the 3 C's. So communication, community, and connection. And so as a speaker and writer, and podcaster, I really focus on those on my website, itsandrewhorn.com. And so I facilitate retreats around the country. Tonight I'll be facilitating a dating experience in New York. Next week I'll be speaking for Fortune 500 fashion brand on social flow and turning social anxiety into social confidence. And so for any of you guys who are interested in the 3 C's and want to dig in deeper there, you can just check me out on my website, and there's all contact forms, and feel free to reach out if you ever want to chat further or collaborate or anything.
Check it out, friends. And thank you so much, Andrew. I've loved this chat.
Likewise, Sam. Thank you so much for your time.